welcome back to our listeners. Today we are talking about the various ways that you can buy a business. So if you're a listener and you're thinking about buying a business, whether it's a small business or a fairly large acquisition, we want to talk through some how-tos and kind of the steps in the evaluation process from the perspective of being a financial advisor. So joining me today is Jeremiah Lee and Randy Barkley. We work together at Tricord Advisors. We are 3 CFPs. Jeremiah is also a California licensed attorney. So we bring that expertise to this conversation. So let's go ahead and kick off this conversation by talking about what are some of the first things that an individual should consider when they're thinking about buying a company.
Yeah, I think I start with why. Why are we buying it? Is it just...
That's a big answer right there, right?
Yeah, is it just to make it bigger? Often when we meet with people, they already have a business and they're looking to expand their business. So that's usually the buy. It's not always that. It could be buying into a brand new industry, but usually they're in the industry. They're going to pick up a competitor, and sometimes they're there because they want to buy staff. They want to expand their team. They want to buy clients, kind of market share. It could even be buying their succession plan. They want to bring some other people in here I can train up. But the why is a big question. It's a lot of work, and I think even after some things we'll talk about today, the deal points, the transaction, all that. At the end of the day, you now have a bigger team, and you've got more HR and more management, and there could be different cultures. So the biggest thing I would ask is just why are we doing this? What's the benefit that's worth all the struggle of going through the change?
Yeah, because to some degree, it's much like a marriage. You're looking at the relationship on the business you're buying, and the personalities and the things that are most important for them. How have they incorporated that into their business, and how is that kind of filtered down in not only to their employees but also to their customers? And does it fit with your philosophy? And I mean, it's really important. I mean, it's not just a meet and purchase, right?
Yeah. Right. And I think too, like we're naturally looking at it from like a service oriented industry, but for those that are in a product related industry, you might just want to expand what different department or branches or offering you have available to you. And so culture may be less critical from a client facing perspective, might be more important of the internal culture, but essentially you're courting, right? You're taking a look inside, you're opening the hood and saying, what's inside this engine, and does it fit with what we do? Does it complement what your current business structure is? And I think that like many things in life, it can appear to be easier than it actually is at the beginning.
For sure.
Because we're all interested in growth. Who doesn't want to grow their business and have more revenue and, increase that bottom line at the end of the year? But the actual process to go about doing it, and furthermore, to do it well, I think that narrows the playing field quite a bit. So,
yeah, I liked we were at a conference not too long ago, and they talked about they called a kind of like an autopsy, but they did it before. Pre-mortem is what they called it. But they're saying, hey, they get all their key leaders in the room and say, hey, we're thinking about buying this business. We think it's going to be great. Everyone's excited. They say, okay, a year from now, we did the deal, we finished it, and it is just a mess. Nothing is working. What went wrong? What would have gone wrong to get us here? And so then they would highlight as a team, well, we didn't onboard new clients, or we forgot to check the machinery, and all the machinery is just a mess. And they actually made a checklist for their due diligence on all the things they can imagine would go wrong. It's just a really clever way to take a moment and think of it backwards and say, how could this be our worst choice ever? What would go wrong? Get that list. And then, going back to real time, is to say, let's look into these items. What does the machinery look like? How are their clients structured? And I think it's just a great thing at the beginning to say, why are we doing this? What's the point? And what are the things that we really need to avoid, and to help identify that value you're looking to collect as part of a deal?
Right. Play devil's advocate.
At the bottom line, when you buy a business, is probably because you want to expand your business, right? I mean, you want to make your business bigger and better and more profitable. And so you look at combining it with another like kind company. There's the books are strewn with companies, big public companies that made really stupid mistakes in acquiring companies that didn't fit their model, didn't fit their expertise, and it turned into absolute failure. So for small businesses, and that's what we're focused on, I would say, generally speaking, you would want to stay within your strengths. You would want to acquire another company that is similar to yours and as like kind as possible, and you can create efficiency. You can create. You're taking on. I mean, there's so many factors that would take a look at, and it's not something you want to be impulsive about for sure.
Right. This is the moment where you start looking at your biggest competitors through a different light, right? They may be your next opportunity, whether you're in the position of wanting to sell or buy. Let's talk a little bit about some things that you want to assess. So if you've gone through the first step, you're convinced that this is a great acquisition to pursue or that it's worth the pursuit. Then you kind of move on to the next phase, which is let's start to evaluate the company that we're taking a look at. And so some of the things are the financial health of that company, the cash flow of that company, evaluation. So let's talk to our listeners a little bit about how do we start to walk through, how do you even get a good, solid valuation of another company?
That's a great question. Most of the deals I've seen, the idea pops in someone's head and the business owners had some connection. There's a phone call, they met at an event, they discussed, and then they kind of come to some shaking hands of saying, hey, I'd want to look into this. And that's when, in my mind, the fun starts of whether they do some sort of like letter of intent to get like a deal documents or, it's usually not right at the beginning. They start turning over their financials to each other, right? That's usually down the road. But that's the idea to say, hey, what's your top line revenue? What's coming in? How much of the market do you have? Like it's really trying to suss out some details. And what we'll often do is do kind of a pro forma of business A, a pro forma financials of business B, and then what's the combined entity? What's this business C? And to say, what would we look like on a combined basis? And initially, you're not going to have all the details for that. But just in a general sense to say, hey, are we going to double because of them? Are we going to, what will we be adding? Is it a new capability? Is it a new product line, a new service line? So I think that would be one of the first key things to assess is kind of like, what is this going to look like as a combined entity? And based on the initial shared information, how many clients do you have? What's your revenues? What products do you sell? Things like that, kind of considering all that. So that's probably the first step.
I mean, financing is a big part of it. Most people don't have the capital sitting in the bank to make the acquisition. So the SBA loan, there's a bank that understands that kind of business and they're able to provide the financing. Obviously, your credit has to be, they'll measure it and you want to make sure that your credit is superior. But at the same point in time, there's you can break private capital. There's seller carryback. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish this. I think that most sellers want their money. And they want it in the shortest period of time. Now, sometimes that is really a disadvantage to the seller because of the tax ramifications, right?
Right, right. Yeah, we work from the advising side, right? We've had to kind of navigate the tax horizon landscape, I guess I'll say, with several clients that are anticipating the sale of their company. And so you've got this large infusion of cash, and that kind of comes into some complex financial planning. It's a great benefit, but what do we do with that cash when we get it all at once? And I like how you're kind of teeing up, like after we've sort of taken time to evaluate the company, there may or may not be reason to get a formal valuation. You can actually hire companies that will come in to perform the valuation. That may be part of the deal process on the lending side. The next really question to answer is, how are you going to fund it? And this is where you were kind of taking a nod to that already. Even if you were a company that had the cash in the bank to purchase the other company, it still may not be the best recommendation to go ahead and use up all that cash. Depending on interest rates and depending on the type of business that you have, cash is king, and to still have that cash in the account and use a portion of it for, so to speak, a down payment, but then to continue to look at lending options. And, you can get competing offers, right, from multiple different lending agencies. Like you referenced SBA, we've got traditional bank financing. And so let's talk through kind of some of the pros and cons there. That process can be really tedious.
Yeah. Well, I think
it's
this
really
is
important, though. I mean, it's really tedious, but you're right. It's very important, right?
Yeah. I think this is the moment, like, just to pump this up, people are excited. It's like a moment in their life. We're going to buy a business. We're going to do a thing. And then they talk about financing. It feels like someone takes a big thing of ice water and just throws it on. How are you going to pay for this? You don't have any money. And the bank says, we'll give you money, but we want you, we don't know your
We want you to sign your life away.
Yeah, right. We want to lien on your grandmother's house. We want all all this stuff. Like it can be mind boggling. I think the comment I like you said earlier, there's a lot of options here. And I think this is where, if two business owners have been talking, they got some ideas, they're maybe excited, if they haven't done already, they need to start getting some professionals in there. Just as if you're buying a big commercial building, you want to talk to a real estate or an attorney to walk you through that. It's the same thing when you're buying or selling a business. It starts with the handshake. It starts with the, hey, we're going to do this. But pretty quickly it turns into, how are we actually going to do this in a way that protects both parties? And if there's lending involved, you got to satisfy these banks. There's been a lot of deals where the buyer and the seller, they're united. We want to do this. And they're almost like having to pitch it to the bank. The bank is the one that's acting as this gatekeeper, because unless someone can come up with the money. So to that comment, I've seen a lot of deals that just kind of, they bog a little bit in this moment. They bog down of just saying, we got to figure out how to get this funded. The beautiful aspect is there's seller financing, there's the SBA, there's private lending. Some things that Randy, you already mentioned, like there are a lot of options out there. And if the value is there, one thing that I appreciate is get all the critical minds in there. Get a banker to look at it, get a skeptical friend to look at it, get a CPA, to look at it. And if it pencils out to them also, you really got something that's exciting. So I think it's a great, not seeing it as a burden, but seeing it as a good check as you go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many things that you want to take a look at. I mean, obviously, depending upon what you're doing, if you're doing a service, going back, Laura, to your comment, if you're acquiring a service company, the key issue is the age of the clients. I mean, where's your business coming from? But also the people inside of this particular company. How long have they been there? How long do you think they're going to stay? Is there going to be a full replacement of some key individuals in that? Are you buying the key individual? In essence, are you making sure that person stays in the company at least for a certain period of time? What happens if that person dies or becomes sick? There's just so many factors. And what I find that most people that are entrepreneurial, they're always looking at the positive upside. They're always saying, well, if we do this, we're going to make X. Yeah.
Right.
And our response is, well, we hope you make X. That'll make your life better, maybe.
Right.
But if you're not looking at all the details that go into that, and have, going back to your comment, Jeremiah, you got to be realistic. I mean, you get your attorneys in there, you get your accountants in there. Having somebody who knows you really well, who's been really like maybe on a board of advisors with you, if your company's large enough to have that, to really take a good hard look at all these details and come back with their opinion that matters, right?
Right. Someone who's not afraid to give you an honest response. And you don't necessarily, I'm not saying that you need a bunch of negative Nellies in your life, people that are just naysayers, but you need people who are sober-minded, who will give you honest feedback. And I think this is the heavy lift of this process, is kind of funding the deal and walking through the deal documents. And if you haven't done the due diligence in part one, laying the foundation of the why am I pursuing this, both on the buyer side if you're the purchaser, but you also want to see that there's a really solid purpose on the seller side as well, because inevitably you're going to have moments where it's stressful and you're taking on this added risk, and you or the seller might get cold feet. I know, Jeremiah, you've talked often in the legal side of the work that you do, that some deals, honestly, they just kind of fizzle. They don't all blow up in smoke if they're not going to work. Some of them just kind of fizzle, like the momentum goes away, because it requires a tremendous amount of time to do it well. And it's not to say that it's not possible. It's not to say it's not a fantastic way to grow your company. So again, you don't need people that are negative. You don't need people that are just naysayers, but you do need a group of people that will speak insightful words and be sober-minded to kind of counsel you through the acquisition.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. I think it's so good. I think the parts that then start becoming nuts and bolts. We want to do it. We found a way to get the money. Often then it becomes, or I think the professionals start adding some really good layers of what's the tax impact. What are we going to do with due diligence? What do we need to look at? And for our role specifically, the investment advisor and the kind of the wealth manager, man, we look at this. Is this going to be useful for you? Like, is this moving up your retirement date? Is it actually moving back your retirement date? Is this going to allow you to experience, like, what is this going to impact, not just your business, but actually you personally? How is this acquisition going to impact you? And often it's saying, well, I'm going to take on risk and I'm going to have a lot of hard work for the next 5 years. And then, it's going to be great, is often the idea. But really bringing some professionals to look at that. And The how will this impact me is a really good question. Just kind of run those numbers. That's a lot of what we do, but also the tax overlay. I've had a number of folks who, on the seller side, they're looking to sell their business and they realize the amount of taxes they're about to pay because they were a founder. They built it from zero. So they got all this built-in capital gain here. And sometimes there'll be an opportunity for them not just to sell their business and exit, but to sell most of their business and then roll over some of it and become a shareholder in the new business going forward, a much larger business. And it defers taxes when you do that. So we've had some light bulbs go on for people to say, oh, rather than just seeing this as I'm going to sell and leave, like this is an ongoing partnership. I'm going to get to roll this money over. I'm now a shareholder. I might even have a job in the future. And you're working for this other entity. And, there's some little bits of, not to say jujitsu, but shifts that really add value to someone's life. And it's really useful.
Yeah, and personality evaluation. So that particular model, my experience is that rarely works because you've got a process. So if you're going to stay on, let's say you're going to continue to retain interest in the company, the management of that company, I've just found that entrepreneurials don't like to give up the decision process. And pretty quickly, there becomes a conflict. Yeah. And that conflict can turn into a real, because particularly if you're buying a company that has the same employees and you're still in that business, they're going to come to you for the decision process, not the new owner that just bought it. And because that's what they've done in the past. So it's a very tricky thing to do to be able to retain the expertise of the seller. And then you get the buyer who is now overseeing everything. So anyway.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So we've talked about different ways to finance a deal. We've talked about traditional lending. We've talked about a little bit. We can touch on seller financing, which is a buyback note, really structuring an equal series of payments back to the seller over time. There's investor or partner capital investment. Now, there's lots of different ways to do this, and depending on the size of the deal, you can look at different silent equity partnerships where they'll infuse capital into the company. You use that capital to make the acquisition. And there's obviously an interest owed back to the equity partners or some sort of benefit.
Most cases, are they taking not only the interest, but they're taking a participation in the profit? I mean, in that situation, is that what you have found, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I don't work a whole lot. I haven't worked a whole lot where we have third-party investors coming in to be part of this, because most founders, and I think rightly so, are pretty slow to give up equity. They want to hold on to the equity, and they want to come through. So what I've done a lot is they call it private equity, where it's not an individual person, but really it's a private equity firm that has backed a company, and that company kind of goes on a buying rampage a little bit to say, hey, we have these private equity backers, they're giving us X amount of dollars, and we're going to do 7 transactions over the next 2 years to really grow our footprint. We see that a lot. That's a lot where the money comes from. What I don't see as much is when you reach out to a wealthy friend and they say, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'll come in with 10 million," or something that I'm sure that happens. Yeah,
yeah.
Sure
sometimes we counsel. I mean, that's some of the advice that we offer to some of our clients. They'll come in and they'll say, "Hey, I got this tip on this really great company, or it's my cousin's company, and I swear it's going to go gangbusters." And maybe it is a good. Sometimes it is a good opportunity, but are we going to allow them to bet the farm on it? That wouldn't be our recommendation. Not allow, it's their choice, but it's in our recommendation. So let's talk about some advanced deal structures in the time we have remaining. So this is where we're talking about stock purchase or asset purchase agreements.
Yeah, kind of a big brush strokes. You think of a company, like a corporation, they've got stock. The options as a buyer is you can either buy the stock from the owners, and as of the next day, you own it. You now the shareholder. Just as you think of an Apple or a Google, these big companies, you just buy the stock, and once you buy the stock, you own the company. In most smaller size business transactions, there's some risk with that, because when you buy the stock, you are now the owner as if you were the owner previously or in the future. If there's tax liabilities, if there's HR liabilities, you're the owner of the company, and so that can all come back to you. So you have to be a little mindful of how you do that. In any deal, there's going to be what's called reps and warranties and indemnification. Those are kind of what protect the buyer. But what's most common, I want to say most, what's fairly common is people try and do what's called an asset sale, to say, you keep your corporation. All I want to do is buy out the assets from inside of your corporation and move them over to my corporation. so that all the HR issues and tax issues, you keep those. I just want to have your machinery and your employees and your client book of business. And so that they do an asset sale. So you have a stock sale or an asset sale. Both have their pros and cons. We expressed a few of them. The big pro of a stock sale is you have a lot more tax flexibility of how you structure it, whether you roll over some of your existing equity into the other. And as soon as I say that, if there's any lawyers that do work in this space, they say, "Oh, but I can do it. I can convert an asset sale to be treated like a stock sale, and I'll make a 338H10 election, and I'll do that." You know, there's right. It jumps right in. So there's a lot that goes.
You notice
into this.
I didn't say anything on that one because I don't know about all those little codes.
That's right.
Right, exactly. Job security there for you.
But again, in our firm, I think it's really important to know that we do have that expertise. In Jeremiah, he's done a lot of this for another firm, and he's helped other companies do that with us. And it's really important to have that kind of background and expertise on this. So anyway.
Yeah, and sometimes there's the doing the nuts and bolts is what I used to do, but a lot of it is just knowing the questions to ask. We've had a lot of clients who, you know, even before they jump into some of these legal, you know, transactions, legal things, we just have a session, we just talk about it, and we say, hey, what might be coming? Hey, if this is going to be good, you need to ask these 4 or 5 questions. And man, I love it when they leave armed and knowing that they're going to show up at, you know, with their whoever the potential seller could be or the attorneys they're about to talk to. They get to feel like the smartest person in the room because they know all the questions to ask. And I think that's a great kind of being their resource behind the scenes in a lot of these transactions, because we're investment advisors, we're wealth managers, but we can lend that expertise in these other areas, especially buying a business.
Right. And I think that I've seen and witnessed when you can equip them with the right questions to ask, you've actually diffused or averted conflict. Because you get to the point, and when you're in the midst of some of these negotiations, emotions come into play, and there's a lot on the line, and there's big personalities and egos and, you know, all the things, politics and everything, all the complexities of business, and now you're mashing 2 of them together. And so part of the role that we play as financial advisors, both offering the legal side, which is a benefit to some of the services that we can offer, but really just the counsel. So that you can show up to that shareholder meeting. You can show up to that deal negotiation with the right questions to ask, get down to the point, and not just pursue conflict, but actually pursue resolution. So in our last final minute here, let's talk about just really quickly, maybe some signs, either some warning signs or signs that you are actually getting a good deal or that it's a good partnership. What are just maybe a couple things that you would throw out there?
Yeah, I think so many entrepreneurs, their gut or those kind of the intuitive sense. You know, I never really did just trust that guy, or I'm just not comfortable with the you know, whenever I go to their office, it feels like it's like a charade's going on. Like I just don't feel comfortable here. You know, it's hard to put your finger on it, but right, those are really meaningful to keep an eye out for. Like if you're looking for a business partner, if you're looking to move forward, I think you need to treat it like Randy said at the very beginning, like a marriage. Like this is an important thing that we're about to step into that's going to bind us together for many years, even if you're just giving me payments. But we're going to be connected for many years. And am I comfortable there?
Yeah, I think it comes down to is trust but verify. And again, building a relationship. But you need to listen to that small voice in the back of your head. When something pops up and if you discount it and push it to the side, you'll probably end up having to deal with that in some larger degree down the road because your intuition, again, all the black and white and all the numbers and everything else, if you're in that business and you're buying another business of like kind, you have experience. And when you're going through the process, you want to make sure that you don't have the blinders on, that you're not listening to the things that you need to be writing those down and thinking about those later. Because if in fact that small thing that is just kind of discounted and put to the side, it could come back and really bite later, and it would be much more difficult to resolve at a later date. So,
I think a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about it is really important. And if the rush to put the deal together is starting to press, I would say I'd be very careful about that one. Yeah.
Right. Take a minute and walk away from it and see if your feelings towards it, your intuition towards it changes or stays the same. So Well, we're just about out of time, but I think some of the nuggets that we talked about hopefully will be helpful to our listeners, and really just how important it is to have wise counsel around you. As financial advisors, we'd love to be a part of that team. So if you are a listener and you're looking at buying a company, or if you're looking at selling your company and you've got more questions, reach out to us. We'd love to help you and be a part of your team here at Tricord Advisors. To all of our listeners, thank you so much.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.